Good afternoon, and it really is afternoon. Okay, let's try that again. Good afternoon. It is so awesome to be here today. I go to about a dozen leadership and HR conferences a year, most of them global, and this is my absolute favorite one. We bring together people from 110 different countries, all like-hearted, not like-minded, coming together to solve some of our biggest challenges. So it's such a delight to be here. The other thing is there's always this appreciative lens that we look through here. Dr. Bhatia just makes this place positive. He oozes positivity. And that's so much fun to be part of an organization like that. So I've learned something from each of you. To my esteemed colleagues, thank you for going short. So I've got a 215-page PowerPoint deck. So if I get up to 2 hours, you might want to give me a flag on that. Would that be okay? You're good with that? Okay, so it's been said that leadership is the most studied and least understood phenomenon on the planet. So what have I devoted my life to for the last 30 years? Studying leadership. But it's not just leadership. It's specifically something I call socially responsible leadership. It's a term I coined back in 1998, and it actually was part of my foundational doctoral dissertation. If you think of what was going on in 1998 in the world, we were overmanaged and underled. The world was filled with hierarchical, autocratic, win-at-all-cost leaders across every sector. Greed seemed to get rewarded. Turbulence in the world economy was causing global instability. The world was becoming more and more polarized. The chasm between the rich and poor had never been bigger. There was so much anger, so much hatred, so much frustration in the world, which makes, again, coming to a conference like this such a delight. We lived in what I call an either-or versus a both-and world, where you're either for me or you're against me. There's no such thing as living in the gray area. And the trust in our leaders was at an all-time low. So when I first started studying social responsible leadership back in 1998, these were the things that were true. I want to move us forward to 2024 and see what's going on in the world today. Do you recognize this list? Overmanaged and underled. World is filled with hierarchical, autocratic, win-at-all-cost leaders. Greed still seems to be rewarded. Turbulence in the economy is causing global instability. The chasm between the rich and poor has never been greater. It continues to get bigger. And we live in an either-or versus both-and society. So why have we come 26 years and we haven't made a dent? And when I say we haven't made a dent, that's not true. There's been all sorts of amazing projects, leadership development projects, HR development projects that have made individuals' lives beautiful and have changed things at the individual level, the team level, the organizational level, even in some cases the societal level. But what we don't see is this across the globe. This same kind of spirit that we have here, we don't see that same thing around the world. And so, jump back to, 1998, and I said there had to be a better way. So at that point in time when I was studying, I was looking at leadership, and the only things being written about leadership were things like CEOs of organizations that were splitting them up and breaking up families and killing towns and making a whole bunch of money, or CEOs that were autocratic, CEOs that were, it wasn't about the people, it was all about them. And yet, when I would sit on airplanes and I'd be sitting next to someone reading a book about leadership, it was always one of those, business leaders. But when I would say to them, who are some of the leaders that you most admire? top three always, other than coaches, family members, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, and Martin Luther King. So I got to thinking, these are the social leaders of our times. These are the leaders that saw some unmet need and went out and did something about that. So I decided I was going to interview 22 founders and not-for-profit organizations that were making a significant and compelling difference in the world and see if I could unlock the secret sauce behind socially responsible leadership. Mother Teresa, one of my favorite quotes by her is, "Give of your hands to serve and your heart to love." Now, 95% of all leadership development programs that exist out there focus unapologetically on the head. We're going to focus unapologetically on the heart. Is that okay? And it fits with the theme of this conference. So when I started looking at what does heart-based leadership look like and what are the things that draw people to Mother Teresa and Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., I realized you really do need to start from the heart. So the heart defines who you are. The heart defines where your dreams originate. It defines what you believe. It determines which direction you lead. It's where your deepest passions reside. It's where vision is ignited, whatever that looks like for you. It's where you discover your authentic purpose. And there's been a lot of conversation about the importance of individual purpose, organizational purpose, core values. And the last is, this is where character comes from. So when I looked at leadership through that lens, and I interviewed these folks, I came up with different findings than a typical leadership study. Ken Blanchard, who spoke here a couple years ago, says the journey of life is to move from a self-serving heart to a serving heart. You finally become an adult when you realize that life is about what you give rather than what you get. So social responsible leadership is about helping people move the needle to become selfless leaders. Now, back in 1998, I was in a PhD in organization development program, and I was trying to figure out what my topic was, and every class I took, it's like there was a class on team dynamics, it's like, I'm going to write my dissertation on that. Then there was one on globally social change organizations. I'm going to write it on that. There's one on strategy. I'm going to write it on that. So after 2 years of formal courses, I was no closer to coming up with my dissertation. So I really started thinking about this notion of leadership and socially responsible leadership. So think about 1998. When I put the word leadership into the search engine, I don't even think Google was around back then. How many hits do you think I got for the word leadership? Yes, anyone? 3? That's socially responsible leadership. So just the word leadership. 9.8 million. And if you've ever done doctoral research, you have to be contributing new knowledge. That's a little too broad. Now when I put in the word socially responsible and leadership, I got 3 hits. And they were completely unrelated to what I was looking for. So juxtaposition to that, today, 26 years later, if you put in socially responsible leadership today, and this was from my room last night, so you can check me on it, 2.17 million hits. Servant leadership, 982,000. Transformational leadership, 853,000. Values-driven leadership, 193,000. So if you add up the bottom 3, we still don't hit socially responsible leadership. We started a movement, which is really exciting. And when I look at those other positive-based forms of leadership or theories of leadership, they're not that different. I could tell you each one and the nuances of it. We don't have time for that first. You probably don't care. So I use them interchangeably. So this is Gus's definition of socially responsible leadership. I'm not even going to let you read the whole thing because once you've heard one definition of leadership, you've heard exactly that, one definition of leadership. Leadership is extraordinarily contextual. It comes from your background, it comes from your culture, and it comes from your belief system. So this was the way I defined it for purposes of the dissertation. I don't know that I would even define it that way today. I keep molding and shaping it. Everybody wants the top 10 list or the top 8 list or the top 5 list. These are things that I found to be common characteristics of these leaders that were making a significant and sustainable impact on the world, not to get rich and famous, but because they saw there was some unmet need out there. So none of these should surprise you. Servant's heart, they come from a place of unconditional love. It's all about purpose and values. They need to be authentic and vulnerable. And you think about 1998, CEOs that had the courage to be authentic and vulnerable when nobody was talking about authenticity or vulnerability-based leadership. Unconditional trust. They were amazing storytellers that could look back over their lives' experiences and they could actually pick out different pivotal moments and tell you what was going on and what's the leadership lesson they learned. They had a bias for action. Just do it. They walked the talk. Unwavering focus on the vision. And sometimes it took tremendous courage, because when you're that lone voice out there and you're speaking about things that other people aren't speaking about, that can be a place where some of these people got death threats. Some of these people were sued, like for custody of their children, but they had the courage to follow what they thought was the right thing to do. And they focused on creating inclusive cultures. I don't even think the word, or DEI was around at that point, that term, DEI. So again, it's not about socially responsible leadership per se. Socially responsible leadership to me is synonymous with servant leadership, transformational leadership, values-driven leadership. You can throw in any other benevolent leadership. There's a whole bunch of different theories. Basically, socially responsible leadership is the right thing to do. And we're going to find out in a minute if that does make a difference. So what Robert Greenleaf did in 1968, everyone familiar with Robert Greenleaf? Anyone familiar with Robert Greenleaf? So in 1968, he created this little pamphlet, and it was on the servant as leader. And he was the first person to talk about this notion of flipping org charts upside down and being a servant first and a leader second. It was heresy at the time, but what he gave us was this beautiful philosophy, but no methodology. So I thought if this is something we were going to put into practice in organizations, we better be able to put it in practice in organizations. So I built a leadership. You see its capability model, not competency model now, so I made that shift about 5 years ago. And all I want you to focus on is there's basically 5 big categories. So there's leading self from a place of authenticity. Leadership starts and ends with you. There's a part of developing people, creating the conditions for people to flourish and become the best versions of themselves. It's about building relationships, one-to-one, one-to-team, organizationally. It's about cultural, cultural IQ, EQ, all the different Qs. And then leading strategically. These leaders have this amazing ability to see a preferred future, but then also figure out how can you get there, what are the steps. And finally, good leaders drive results. And that's the one people got hung up on. It's like, well, isn't that an either or, Gus? Aren't organizations out there just to make money and they're leaving dead bodies in the wake? Are there actually some organizations out there that can treat their people well, create the conditions for people to flourish, and get the financial results? And the great news is there was no empirical research then. I kicked off this series of empirical research, and for the last 26 years, there's been thousands of studies that have now proven beyond a doubt that this works. It works in organizations, it works in families, it works in society, it works in countries. I've taken this to Ghana, West Africa. We translated everything. We created 15,000 leaders there, which started from a conversation under a banya tree. So you can see the foundation or the 5 elements haven't changed. Here's just some examples. Healthcare, government example, a higher ed example, a global mission example, a corporate example, a not-for-profit example. So I believe these to be the 5 leadership roles, excuse me, or the 5 tenets of socially responsible leadership, or the 5 domains. Now, Ed Schein says, leaders create cultures, and cultures create the next generation of leaders. Now, I get excited about that as a leader myself and as somebody that develops other leaders. So, by a show of hands, how many have people that report into them? How many are leaders of leaders, or leaders of people? I want to reframe this for you. So, as opposed to thinking of them as my team or my organization, to me, leadership is about being entrusted with the care of another human being's livelihood and their potential opportunity to flourish, to become the best versions of themselves. And I try to go into every single leadership action, every single leadership conversation with that notion. It's an awesome, awesome responsibility, but when you can look through that lens, man, the seat you get is amazing. It's spectacular. You're getting a front row seat to watching people's lives being transformed on a daily basis. And it doesn't get much better than that. So take it from individual leader development. People started to say, does this work at the organization level? Right after I finished my dissertation, the CEO of a telecommunications company called me up and he said, is this socially responsible leadership crap he is work in the real world? And I said, well, yeah, Jack, it does. And he said, well, then I need you to come to my company and create a socially responsible leadership-led organization. And I said, well, Ed Schein says it takes about 6 years to transform a culture. And in my experience, when I had that conversation with most CEOs, they say, see ya. Or they say, what can you do for me in a month? Or can you have a lunch and learn and we'll talk about it. So this systemically brings together all of the different elements, both from a performance management side and a talent development side, that produces significant and sustainable results. But you can see that everything starts from the strategic foundation, from the mission, which is the purpose, the vision, which is where we're going, the strategy, which is how we're going to get there, and the way mission operationalizes on the people side, through values, through behaviors, and that's the talent development process on the bottom of the slide. So you measure, or you add performance management to talent development, and you get significant and sustainable results. Now, am I making that up? Good news is I'm really not. So 1998 was also the year that Fortune started doing the top companies to work for, top 100. And I went and started researching these companies. 7 of the top 10 companies were doing the tenets, the principles, the thoughts around socially responsible leadership. They just didn't have language for it. And so they were doing it, great courage themselves, not having any idea whether this was going to work, but they did it because it felt like the right thing to do. In 2008, the Great Places to Work For started in India and started rating your top 100 companies. And I want to share with you some statistics, and I wrote them down so I wouldn't get them wrong. And this is my most current research when we think about does it work. So the way Great Places to Work For works in India, it focuses on a creative workplace, cultures that employed individuals to reach their full potential, not unlike what the ones in the US are. Now, India companies on the list have 8% increase in productivity, 10% increase in innovation year over year. Since 2008, India companies have yielded 14 times the cumulative business returns against other companies and outperformed the major stock indices by 3 times. So it's easy for me to stand up in front of a CEO that says, will this stuff work in the real world? It not only works in the real world, it is the best possible model to employ in the real world. So if you want to keep the conversation going, you just got a 2-week PhD all-inclusive class in 15 minutes or so. That's my name, my info. I think the QR code will get you to my LinkedIn page. And I just want to end with this. It's one of my favorite quotes. Margaret Mead says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." So when I look out at this room and I look out at all of these leaders, some who went through an exercise a few minutes ago where you looked someone else in the eye and said, "I love you," and we're high-fiving each other and we're getting to know each other at a deep level, you are that group of committed citizens. So go forth, change the world, one life at a time. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.